1992 was a slow hurricane season. We had a tropical depression in June. We had another one come along in July. And then the third tropical depression came along. It was the 16th of August and was out in the middle of the Atlantic, and we really didn't think anything of it. As a matter of fact, the day after, when it was Tropical Storm Andrew, we still didn't think anything of it. It took until Wednesday when we started to pay a little bit of attention. And I say a little bit to mean that I put it in my weekend forecast as Watch Andrew. By Friday, this disorganized storm, Andrew, was getting closer, but it just didn't look like much. But still, because it was within sight of us and it was coming in our general direction, that afternoon I went into the weather office at WTVJ and I waited and waited for the afternoon weather maps to come in. And in those days, we had this machine that was this kind of wet paper printer. And the maps came out of the machine like an inch at a time. And it was excruciating waiting for the forecast maps for the next few days coming from NOAA's best computer model that we counted on that time of the afternoon. And finally, when it came in, I looked at it and I said, that model is forecasting high pressure to the north to strengthen. If that happens, that would tend to keep Andrew south, and it would tend to move it faster. So Friday afternoon, I didn't know it was coming. I didn't really forecast it to come. I just saw indications in the weather pattern that we should think about maybe getting a little bit agitated about this. So I went to the news director and I said, I'm concerned about this. The weekend is coming. I think we should raise the flag this afternoon beginning at 5 o'clock. So we blew up the newscast at 5 o'clock and we put in hurricane preparedness segments and we talked about the risk of the storm and mostly that people needed to keep it in their mind. It really wasn't a forecast, it was more a heads up. Well, at the same time, the National Hurricane Center's kind of official forecast was still drifting it toward Central Florida, north of the Bahamas, nowhere near South Florida, and nobody else in town was talking about it. So it's really important to make the distinction. I wasn't forecasting it. I was worried that it was Friday, and if this was going to be a threat, it was going to be a threat late in the weekend. So that was Friday, and things really changed for everybody Saturday morning. Overnight Friday night, suddenly Andrew intensified. Suddenly it picked up speed in our direction. Suddenly it popped out an eye, and suddenly it was a hurricane. So when I got up Saturday morning, I turned on WTVJ and I'm watching, and my eyes go like this. I mean, I was kind of afraid that might happen, but I wasn't forecasting it to happen quite so quickly. And I called the National Hurricane Center, and they said the Bahamas is putting up a hurricane watch at 11 o'clock, and we're going to have to do that later this afternoon if the trend continues. The models have shifted more in our direction, somewhere in South Florida, maybe Palm Beach, maybe Miami, somewhere in South Florida. So I raced to the TV station and went on the air, and I stood there, literally standing there on the air for a good part of the day, from noon till 8 p.m., and all that was behind me was a phone number for people to call in and ask questions. And that went on all day. Saturday at 8 o'clock, we stopped. We just did some cut-ins in prime time to get ready for the 11 o'clock news that we did for 2 hours. We went till 1 a.m. And at 1 a.m., I said, friends, I'm going to go home and get some sleep. And I suggest you do too, because tomorrow may be a very big day in the history of our city, and we may not get sleep tomorrow night. So let's go to sleep, let's get up in the morning, and we'll pick it up, and we'll see where we stand. Starting Sunday morning, it was intensifying, and it was looking fierce on the satellite when it was still on the other side of the Bahamas. And when it hit the Bahamas, it was as perfect a looking hurricane in terms of being super intense as you would ever see. After that, it started to weaken in the sense that the satellite presentation got more ragged. It never was not a threat, but I thought, we may just luck out here because it may be in a down cycle by the time it gets to us. Well, as we went through the afternoon, we were in this somewhat of a down cycle into the late afternoon, into the early evening. And then it came into full radar view. And initially, the eye wall was somewhat fragmented, which was telling me that it was in a down cycle. But as we were watching, with every sweep of the radar, it got more and more filled in. A sign that it was at least coming up. And then by late Sunday evening, it was clear that this was going to be as bad as it could be.